At first, the replies were jokes, the usual 4chan noise. Then, someone posted a file, and the tone shifted in a single refresh. You're listening to LurmoStories, where we go through the comments that followed. Stay till the end. The scariest thing is how many people said they saw the same thing. It was around 10:30 p.m. when I rolled up to the loading dock of the old warehouse on the outskirts of town. I'd been working as a delivery driver for just under a year, and by now, I had the late-night runs down to a routine. The warehouse, though, was something I dreaded. It was the last stop of my shift, and it always felt off. I couldn't explain it exactly. It wasn't like I had ever seen anything supernatural or out of the ordinary, but there was a vibe about the place that made me uneasy. Tonight was no different. The dock was dimly lit by a single flickering light overhead, casting long shadows over the stacks of boxes and machinery. I parked the truck and grabbed the clipboard, checking the order. Just a couple of pallets of industrial parts. Not a big deal. I walked toward the back door, which was usually unlocked, but tonight it was stuck. Not locked, but it was definitely resisting. I shoved against it a couple of times before it gave way with a squeal, revealing the dimly lit warehouse interior. The air smelled of mildew and old cardboard, and the lights inside buzzed incessantly, blinking every few seconds. The whole place felt like it had been forgotten. A quick glance around, and I saw the night security guard stationed near the far corner. He always worked the graveyard shift, sitting by the security monitors, his head often nodding off in the chair. I didn't really know him, but I'd waved at him a few times. Tonight, though, he was standing unusually still. I didn't think much of it at first. I was tired, and frankly, I wasn't in the mood for idle small talk. As I started unloading the first pallet, I noticed him again. He hadn't moved. Now, I've been coming here for months, and I'd never seen him act like this. Usually, he'd either be sleeping in his chair or watching the monitors, occasionally muttering something under his breath about the cameras. But tonight, he was just standing there, facing the wall, perfectly still. I figured maybe he was having one of those weird nights where he was in some deep thought. I couldn't blame him. It was a shitty job, after all. But something about the way he was standing, his posture too stiff, caught my attention. I glanced over a couple of times as I continued to work. I even called out a "hey" to him. No response. Finally, I got close enough to see his face. His eyes were open, but they were staring straight ahead, unblinking. I paused for a moment, suddenly aware of how quiet it had gotten. The hum of the lights seemed louder now, almost oppressive. "Hey, you all right?" I asked again, louder this time, stepping closer. No response. Not even a flinch. Now, I'd seen my fair share of oddities working late hours, but something about this guy made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The stillness, the way his head was tilted just slightly to the left, like he was waiting for something, or someone, was making me feel a little wrong. I set down the box I was carrying and walked over to him, a little hesitant. The closer I got, the more I felt like something wasn't right. I could see his uniform, a cheap, ill-fitting jacket, and his shoes, scuffed and worn. But there was something off about him. He looked too perfect. His posture too rigid, like a mannequin. I reached out and gave his shoulder a gentle tap. Nothing. I pulled back in shock. This was strange. I had to check. Was he even real? My heart was pounding now. I pushed a little harder, and he shifted ever so slightly. I almost let out a relieved breath, but then I noticed it. There was something wrong with his hands. They were just too smooth. No calluses, no wrinkles. They were perfectly molded, like they belonged to a doll. Okay, this is not good, I muttered under my breath. I took a step back, still staring at him. What was going on? I had to be imagining this, but the longer I looked at him, the more certain I was that something was off. He wasn't breathing, he wasn't moving, but he was standing there in the middle of the damn warehouse, perfectly still. Then, I saw something that made my stomach drop, a slight glint in his eyes. It wasn't a reflection from the lights either. No, this was something else, almost like a flicker of life. I took another step back. At that moment, I heard the front door of the warehouse creak open, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the cavernous space. I turned toward the noise, relieved to see someone else. But when I looked back at the guard, he was gone. My breath caught in my throat. There was no way he could have moved that fast. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. I was tired, after all. Too many late nights. But the unease lingered in my chest as I quickly finished unloading and rushed back to my truck. Just before I slammed the truck door shut, I glanced back at the door to the warehouse. There, standing perfectly still in the shadows, was the guard. Only this time, I noticed that his face was different. His features were less defined, almost blurry. I didn't wait around to investigate any further. I threw the truck into gear and drove off, trying to shake the feeling that I had just seen something that shouldn't have been possible. But as I pulled away, I couldn't help but wonder, was he still standing there? I couldn't stop thinking about that night. The strange mannequin-like guard, the way he moved, or didn't move, and the way his eyes seemed wrong. It stuck with me, even after I got home and tried to shake it off. But there was something in the back of my mind telling me I had missed something important. The weird thing was, I didn't want to go back to that warehouse. I really didn't. But the next night, I found myself heading there again. It was another late-night run, the same old routine.
I didn't want to be a coward, especially after I'd spent the entire day trying to convince myself it was all in my head. Besides, I figured I could at least confirm what I had seen, one way or another. When I pulled into the parking lot that night, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. I mean, it was always quiet, but this time it was almost unnerving. There were no trucks unloading, no employees milling around. The place was deserted. Just the hum of the old lights buzzing overhead. I parked the truck and grabbed the clipboard, checking my order again. Same as last night, another load of industrial parts. Nothing fancy. But something still felt off. I walked toward the loading dock, and that's when I saw him again. The guard. He was standing in the same spot as the night before, facing the wall, like some kind of statue. His posture hadn't changed. His face was still as blank as I remembered, and once again, his eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. I froze for a moment, suddenly overwhelmed by the same sense of dread I had felt the night before. I couldn't believe it. There was no way this guy was still here. No way. He should have been long gone by now. But he wasn't. He was still there, unmoving, his body stiff as a board. I had to know what was going on. Was he real? Was he just some guy with a serious medical issue? Or was there something else happening? I cleared my throat, calling out to him. "Hey, you doing all right?" No response. I felt a chill run down my spine as I stepped closer to him. This time, I wasn't going to be as hesitant. I needed answers. I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder again. It was cold. Too cold. Not just from the night air, but like something unnatural was radiating from him. Then, I saw it. A small, almost imperceptible twitch in his fingers. It was like his hand was trying to curl, but it couldn't fully move. I pulled my hand away and stumbled back, my heart racing. This wasn't right. Not at all. That's when I noticed something even stranger. His jacket. The stitching was different. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but no. There were threads hanging loose, like the fabric itself was unraveling. And the edges of the fabric were starting to fray, like it was wearing down in real time. Something was very wrong. I glanced back toward the entrance, but the noise I had heard earlier, the door creaking open, footsteps echoing, was gone. The place was silent again. Too silent. I took a deep breath and steeled myself. I needed to finish unloading. I didn't want to spend any more time in here than necessary, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was drawing me back. As I passed the guard again, I caught a glimpse of something on the back of his neck. There was a small, faded tag, like the kind you'd find on a mannequin. My stomach dropped. This guy wasn't human. He wasn't even a person. I blinked, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But the more I stared at him, the more certain I became. He wasn't a guard. He was a damn mannequin. My hands started to shake as I tried to process what was happening. Why would they put a mannequin here? It didn't make any sense. Was this some kind of sick prank? Or was there something else going on? I reached into my pocket for my phone, intending to take a picture. As I pulled it out, I glanced back at the guard. His face. It wasn't just blank anymore. It was shifting, almost like the features were melting. I swear to God, his mouth was widening. I took a step back, heart hammering in my chest, and just as I was about to turn around and leave, I heard it. A soft, dry whisper from somewhere behind me. Leave. I froze. The whisper was unmistakable. It wasn't in my head. It was real. The voice came from the direction of the guard. No, the mannequin. I spun around, but he was still facing the wall. His head was slightly tilted forward, as if he hadn't spoken at all. But my skin crawled as I stood there, unable to move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. There was something wrong with this place. I had no idea what it was, but I had to get out. I grabbed the pallet I was unloading and practically ran back to the truck. As I slammed the door shut and started the engine, I looked back one last time. The guard was still there, unmoving. Except this time, he was looking directly at me.
I floored the gas pedal and didn't stop until I was miles away. The next few days were a blur. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that mannequin-like guard, his empty eyes staring straight at me, unblinking. The whispering voice kept echoing in my head, "Leave." I tried to push it all out of my mind. I convinced myself it was just some weird, tired hallucination. Late-night fatigue, a trick of the lights, maybe even some stress. After all, I'd been working long hours with minimal sleep. But even as I tried to ignore it, the thought kept gnawing at me. There was something wrong with that warehouse. By the end of the week, I found myself once again on my way there. My shift had been a mess, and I just wanted to get it over with. I kept thinking maybe I'd just see if the guard was still there and make sure I wasn't losing my mind. If he was, well, maybe I'd find some way to report it, get the place shut down, or whatever. As I pulled into the parking lot that night, I felt a familiar chill crawl up my spine. The lights overhead flickered. The usual emptiness surrounded the building. No trucks, no other drivers unloading, just that eerie silence that felt like the warehouse was holding its breath. I parked and grabbed my clipboard, my heart already racing before I even got out of the truck. I glanced toward the entrance. There was no guard this time, no mannequin. The place seemed empty, silent, a little too quiet. I got out of the truck, my footsteps slow as I walked toward the door. As I neared the loading dock, I noticed something strange, a slight draft of cold air. The door was open, just a crack, but enough for the cold to seep through. I hesitated for a moment before pushing it all the way open. The inside was darker than usual, the dim lights above buzzing in that same erratic, unsettling rhythm. Then I heard it, a faint sound, a soft scratching, like fingernails on metal. It came from the far side of the warehouse. I froze. There was no way anyone else could be here. The guard, no. The mannequin was gone. I stepped further inside, the sound growing louder. As I moved closer to the source, my breath caught in my throat. There, near the security desk, was the guard's chair, but the guard was nowhere to be seen. Then I noticed the monitors. The screens were all on, showing the usual camera feeds of empty hallways, loading docks, and the occasional stack of boxes. But as I approached the desk, I saw something that made my blood run cold. One of the monitors wasn't showing an empty hallway. It was showing the very spot where the mannequin had been standing. But it was empty now. No mannequin, no guard, just the silent, empty space. But then, it flickered. The image on the screen changed. It wasn't a glitch, no. This time, the mannequin was there. It wasn't standing perfectly still like it had before. It was moving. Very slowly, the figure turned its head toward the camera. I could see its features shifting, contorting. Its eyes, those lifeless, glassy eyes, seemed to narrow as if it was aware of me, watching me. I stumbled backward, panic flooding my chest. But as I turned, I froze in place. There, standing just inside the doorway, was the guard. No, he wasn't the guard anymore. The mannequin. It was staring right at me, that same frozen expression, its body unnaturally still. But the thing that made my stomach churn wasn't the way it stood. It was the eyes. This time, they weren't blank. This time, they were familiar. I'd seen them before, on the security camera, in that split second when it turned to look at me. And then it clicked. It was my eyes. I backed up toward the door, my legs shaking so badly I could hardly stand. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. Was I losing it? Was I hallucinating? I ran for the exit, pushing the door open with more force than I intended, slamming it behind me. I was outside. The cool air hit me, but I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I needed to get out of there. But just as I reached the truck, I heard it again. That whisper. Louder this time. Leave. I didn't even look back. I jumped into the truck, slammed the door shut, and drove as fast as I could. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to be anywhere but there. For the next few weeks, I didn't go back to the warehouse. I refused to. But the memory of that mannequin, those eyes, followed me, even when I slept.
Even when I tried to move on, I stopped taking late-night deliveries altogether. Eventually, the company found someone else to handle the late shifts, someone who didn't ask questions. But a few months later, I heard a rumor. Apparently, the warehouse had been closed down. They'd found the guard's body in the security room, or what was left of it. They said it had been there for months. But here's the thing. There was no guard. There was no mannequin. At least, that's what they said. But I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. Sometimes, late at night, when I close my eyes, I still hear that whisper. Leave. I've been the facility manager for a nonprofit call center for nearly 5 years, and nothing ever changes. The building systems are basic, and everything runs by the book. For the most part, I show up at my shift, make sure the air conditioning's working, monitor the HVAC, check the lights, and then spend the rest of my day dealing with odd little tech problems that seem to crop up at the most inconvenient times. I'm not complaining. The job is easy and the pay's steady. I deal with all the behind-the-scenes stuff, while the workers up on the call center floor do their thing. They're great at what they do. The customers never know, but it's a small part of a much larger operation, mostly managing databases, customer relations, and a few charity projects. The kind of job that requires a lot of people answering calls all day, and I keep the building running smoothly so they can focus on that. No drama, no issues. At least, that's how it's always been. But that all changed last Tuesday. It started with the backup generator. The call center is on the basement level of the building, and the backup generator is just a standard piece of equipment we keep in case of power failure. Usually, it sits idle, humming quietly in the background, never really needed. Every once in a while, the power will flicker, and the generator kicks in automatically. But it always turns off within a few minutes once the system detects that the main power's back up. It's just a routine thing, nothing out of the ordinary. That day, however, was different. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, the last shift of the day winding down. There wasn't much going on, and I had time to do my usual check on all the building systems. I started in the control room, making sure all the data backups were running. Everything seemed fine, normal levels, normal stats. I checked the temperature of the basement. The air conditioning was working, the humidity levels were stable. I wasn't even thinking about the generator when I heard it. The generator kicked on. It wasn't a surprise at first. Sometimes it kicks on during surges, or when the lights flicker. We had an electrical issue a few months ago where a nearby construction site kept tripping our power supply. So this wasn't the first time I'd heard the backup generator roar to life. But then it didn't turn off. It just kept running. I listened for a second, standing in the control room, just trying to figure out what was going on. It wasn't right. Normally, the generator hums for about 30 seconds, and if the power's back on, it shuts itself off. But this time, the hum stretched on. It became louder and more intense, the vibration of the building shifting, like the entire space was being pulled into its frequency. I made my way down to the basement, half expecting it to be a minor glitch in the system. I figured I'd press the emergency stop switch and everything would be fine. But when I reached the basement, I realized it wasn't just the generator running. There was something wrong with the sound. It wasn't just the usual mechanical hum. The tone had shifted, almost like it was speaking to me. I could feel it in my chest, vibrating like a bass note from a deep subwoofer. My hands went a little clammy as I approached the generator's control panel. I pressed the off switch. Nothing. I pressed it again, and again. Still nothing. The generator kept running, its noise growing louder and more oppressive. It wasn't supposed to do this. The emergency stop button should have worked. I could hear the air conditioning cutting in and out, as though the building itself was struggling to adjust, the systems fighting each other. But the generator? It wasn't budging. I tried calling the maintenance team. Nothing. I dialed the emergency on-call technician. Same thing. No response. By now, my irritation had started to turn into something more uncomfortable. It wasn't like I had a bad feeling, not yet, but there was definitely something off about the entire situation. I stepped back into the hallway and glanced at the control panel again. All the lights were still flashing green, like the system thought everything was working fine. My brain tried to rationalize it. There had to be a reason. Maybe the system was caught in a loop, a glitch, something small that I could fix if I just looked at it from the right angle. But as I walked deeper into the building, I started noticing other things. The lights flickered every so often, and the temperature seemed to climb. I checked the thermostats. The air conditioning had completely stopped. The hallway was warmer than usual. I thought back to the air conditioning failure we'd had a few months ago. Maybe it was just a bad coincidence, but I couldn't ignore the nagging sense of something else being wrong. I headed back to the control room and checked the backup logs. Everything was normal. The generator had been activated, but it should have shut down by now. Yet, it kept running, and it felt like it was running too perfectly, like it was designed to never turn off. I leaned forward and rubbed my eyes, trying to focus. This didn't feel like a typical malfunction. I grabbed the phone again and called the facility manager for the building. The phone rang and rang, but when I finally got through, he told me the weirdest thing. "The system's fine, you know. The generator's just doing its job," he said, with an uncharacteristic calmness that set me on edge. "Just let it run for a while. It'll stop soon enough." I wasn't convinced.
There was something about the way he said it, like he wasn't fully aware of how wrong this situation was. I hung up and walked back toward the basement. That's when I saw it. A shadow. A figure standing at the foot of the stairs leading to the control room. I froze.
It was hard to tell if it was a person or just a trick of the dim light. But something about the way it stood still, unmoving, made the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. I didn't know if I should go toward it or call out to it. Before I could make a decision, the figure disappeared. But the noise didn't stop. I don't know why I didn't leave then. I think part of me was still trying to rationalize it. I was a facility manager, after all. I'd handled power failures, electrical issues, and more serious problems in the past. But this was different. The generator's hum was louder now. It felt like it was pressing in on me. I went down to the basement again, my footsteps hesitant. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but when I reached the generator panel, the lights on the control board were now flashing wildly. The hum was almost deafening. I slammed my hand against the stop button again, but it only made the sound more intense. And then I noticed something else. The power wasn't just malfunctioning. The generator wasn't the only thing that was active in the building. The emergency lights flickered and died. The temperature continued to rise, and now I felt a light sweat forming on the back of my neck. The generator wasn't just humming. It was alive. It had to be. It was feeding off something in the air, feeding off me. I felt like I was suffocating, like the building itself was turning against me. I tried the emergency shutdown once more, but then the door to the basement slammed shut. I could see it now. The shadow wasn't just a trick of the light. It was standing at the bottom of the stairs again, a dark shape, too tall, too wrong to be a person. The hum swelled, becoming all-consuming, vibrating through my very bones. The shadow moved closer, and I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, my hands trembling. And then it whispered, low, in a voice I didn't recognize. "You can't leave." I turned and ran, but the door wouldn't open. I tried again, panicking, but it felt like the entire building had turned against me. The generator was alive. It was feeding on me, trapping me in this labyrinth of shadows and noise. I finally broke free when the emergency lights flickered back on. The door opened with a loud crack. I didn't stop to check behind me. I just ran. I'm not sure if it was the building itself that was wrong, or if something else had taken over the generator, but when I left, I knew one thing for certain. The backup generator won't turn off, and neither will the thing that controls it. I'm not the kind of person who usually writes things like this. I'm not big on posting personal stuff online or sharing strange encounters, but what happened to me a couple of weeks ago won't leave my mind. It's a little hard to talk about, but I feel like I need to. The weirdest thing happened, and I still can't explain it. Honestly, I don't even know if I believe it myself. It started out pretty innocuously. I was on a business trip, a couple of hours out of town for a conference, and I needed to get back to the airport. I'd spent the day on a long call with a client and was feeling mentally drained by the time I ordered my Uber. I wanted to be on time for my flight, so I wasn't looking to make small talk or deal with any hassle. I just wanted to get in the car, get to the airport, and get back home. The car arrived as scheduled, a plain gray sedan, nothing special. I climbed in, set my bag on the seat beside me, and slipped on my headphones to block out any conversation. The driver, a guy in his mid-30s, didn't look at me much when I got in. He just gave a quick nod, and we were off. We left the city and started heading toward the coastal highway. I didn't mind. The scenery was nice. You know the kind of road, long, winding, with high cliffs on one side and a deep drop to the ocean on the other. The kind of place where, if you're not careful, you could easily go off the road and end up in the water. We were about 20 minutes into the ride when I noticed the driver acting a little odd. He kept glancing at his phone, tapping it occasionally. Nothing serious at first. I figured it was probably a map error, as I'd been on these types of roads before, and I knew GPS can be a little iffy with all the hills and sharp turns. But it wasn't just that, it was the way he kept muttering under his breath. "What the hell? What the hell is this thing doing?" he mumbled. I pulled one earbud out of my ear and looked at him in the rearview mirror. "Everything okay?" I asked. He didn't respond right away, just kept tapping his phone screen, clearly frustrated. I wasn't trying to be nosy, but I could tell something was off. Finally, he spoke, but his voice was quieter, like he was talking to himself. "This thing's acting up. I swear, it says I should keep going straight, but there's no road." At this point, I didn't know whether to be concerned or dismiss it as one of those drivers complaining about GPS moments. I didn't have much of a choice. We were on the edge of a cliff, winding through the curves of the highway. There weren't any pull-offs for miles, so I kept quiet, figuring he knew what he was doing. But as we kept going, the way he was looking at the screen started to make me uneasy. I noticed the map on his phone was showing a route that made no sense. It wasn't even following the road anymore. It was cutting straight across land and down into the ocean, as if the road had suddenly just disappeared. The route didn't even curve. It was a straight blue line cutting across the black void of the map, like we were being guided right into the water. I glanced at the road in front of us. The coastal cliffs were still there, the ocean to our right. But there was no way we were driving into the water. That didn't make sense. I had no clue what was going on, but the uneasy feeling in my stomach kept growing. You're sure this is right? I asked, my voice a little sharper than I meant. The driver didn't answer right away. He just kept looking at the screen, swiping and tapping. It's telling me to keep going, straight ahead. I was starting to get nervous. Straight ahead? There's nothing but ocean out there. The driver still didn't respond, just kept tapping his phone like he couldn't process it. I looked out the window at the cliffs that rose steeply on our left, the dark ocean crashing against the rocks. The air smelled salty, briny, and the only sound besides the hum of the car was the occasional distant crash of waves. Then, the driver cursed under his breath. This isn't right. The route's wrong. This can't be. He hit the gas, suddenly accelerating, but it wasn't a normal acceleration. It was like he was trying to make up for lost time. The car was moving faster now, speeding down the road, which was getting narrower. I could feel the car veering too close to the edge. "Hey, slow down," I said, my voice rising with panic. "There's no road up ahead." But he wasn't listening. His eyes were glued to his phone screen, his foot heavy on the accelerator. I had to grab the back of the seat to steady myself. The world outside was getting blurrier, and the sound of the ocean seemed to grow louder with every second. It was almost as if we were driving directly toward the water now. I could feel the car swaying slightly as it hugged the edge of the cliff. I didn't want to panic. I didn't want to be that person who freaked out over something that could be explained. But the map on his phone kept showing that same straight line heading directly into the ocean. I reached forward to tap him on the shoulder. "What the hell's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. "This is not right." He didn't respond. His grip on the steering wheel was tight, and his knuckles were white. He was acting like I wasn't even there, like he was in a trance, his eyes fixed on the phone. Then, in a voice that was almost a whisper, he said, "It's telling me we're almost there." Almost where? There was nothing ahead, just the cliff, the ocean, and us driving right toward it. "Please," I begged, "pull over, turn around." But he didn't listen. And that's when it hit me. We weren't even on the road anymore. The more I looked, the less it made sense. The road wasn't straight. It wasn't even real. We were driving through nothing. Just endless stretches of coastline that didn't match anything on the map. Then the car jerked suddenly to the side, as if it had hit something invisible. I screamed as the world outside the window blurred into a mess of dark, crashing waves. The headlights flashed wildly, illuminating a small patch of the cliff before the car came to a screeching halt. We were no longer on the highway. I didn't know where we were, but it sure as hell wasn't on a road. I turned to the driver, whose head was down now, his phone resting against his lap. The car was silent. The headlights flickered again. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I tugged at the handle. Nothing. Panic gripped my chest as I rattled the door in desperation. Suddenly, the phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a notification. Arriving at destination. I looked around. We were nowhere near a destination. There was nothing around but darkness. The ocean below us, endless and cold. I looked back at the driver one last time. He was gone. The seat was empty. The car was empty. And all that was left was the endless, crashing sound of the ocean.
This was LurmoStories, pulling you through the kind of threads people only talk about in private messages. Now that it's quiet again, listen to your room for a second and ask yourself if you're really alone.